This podcast is brought to you by HEC Paris.
I've been working the last 3 years basically on trying to understand the effects of these word-of-mouth marketing campaigns. So what I would like to do, take let's say about 20-25 minutes to present to you this study and the findings that we had, and we can discuss that of course also. So where it's not here. So the paper is called Network Narratives, Understanding Word-of-Mouth Marketing in Online Communities, and I've downloaded the entire paper for you on the course website if you're interested in reading that. The program that we had data about was a product seeding program in Canada. In the paper we say North America, it was in Canada. It was one of the first product seeding programs that were put into place in Canada, which directly would, I would say in a sense, limits almost that's what you need to take into account when you read our paper, because between the data collection that occurred in 2006 and today 2009, the frequency of these types of product seeding campaigns have gone up enormously. So whereas maybe in our campaign we still see a lot of naivety in the market as reactions by consumers, today consumers and also the bloggers themselves have become so much more aware of these type of programs. It was a program where a new mobile phone that had significantly good camera on it was being released to the market, and the company behind that liked to create some buzz, to create online and offline buzz to increase the sales of these products, of the particular phone, as well as to use the campaign to monitor a little bit what people would be saying about it. The seeding program consisted of a selection of 90 bloggers that were seeded with the product plus some goodies around it, all worth about $400 Canadian, a manual and that kind of thing. Oh, it's awful, all that is going to happen now every 5 minutes. They were selected by means of email, and they were all also interviewed by phone before they were admitted, so to say, to the program. They did a survey at 2 intervals where they had to tell the marketing communication agency that took care of the execution of the product seeding campaign to what extent they had been engaging in word of mouth about the phone. And very importantly is, in the context of the program, the bloggers were given the phone, they were asked to blog about it. However, they were not given any directions on what to say, like they were not specifically asked to give positive feedback. Also, differently from what you see happening now sometimes, is they were not given more or less ready-made materials that they could use in their word-of-mouth campaign. So they were really given quite some freedom. They were given the phone, and in a sense the expectation was that they would show reciprocity by talking about it. How were these targeted influential bloggers selected? Well, there we go back actually to the things that we've seen in the first course about what determines an influential, so they pretty much apply to these rules in terms of reach, propensity and credibility. There needed to be bloggers that had a significant number of readers, that updated the blog also on a regular basis. It needed to be someone with a particular profile of busy lifestyle, what else? Someone who would likely talk about the product. However, what they did do, and I think what was quite interesting in the campaign, is they did not necessarily only focus on people that had a profile of reviewing technical products. They said we wanted to create buzz in a larger marketplace, so to say. So the profile of people really varies from stay-at-home mothers, knitting groups. There were quite some photographers in it because they hoped that the phone who had a nice camera would be some asset to them. Maybe they didn't really realize that photographers really liked a nice camera, so they had some negative buzz around, some negative comments around that. There were professional bloggers. It was a big range of professions, so to say, that were represented there. And, well, they did tend to pick those people that, for example, also put some pictures on their blog in the hope that they would use the phone to upload pictures on their blog as well. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's what. No, it was not necessarily. There was, for example, a couple of political blogs that were talking about the Canadian situation specifically, but yeah, there were, as I say, for example, a mommy blog that I will present a little bit more in depth. Okay, that was not, yeah, that could have happened in France, let's so to say, but it was Canadian bloggers, yes. The program, in the eyes of both the company and the marketing communications agency, was very successful because a high number of bloggers that had been selected actually blogged about the phone or posted video or photo material, and also through the surveys they knew that bloggers did not only blog about it on their blogs, but they also talked about the phone in their more direct, real-life surroundings. So altogether they were very happy with it. Now, we said, okay, it's very nice that you have all these results. However, you have no idea really in these numbers what did people really say about this campaign? What happened? What happened when these bloggers received these products for free and then in that sense took up the role of being a semi-marketer? What happens when you have these communities of people that share their interests? All of a sudden they're invaded, so to say, by commercial interests, because bloggers that received a phone that was actually pretty expensive, we did see in the results that a lot of them do feel some sort of need to reciprocate. They need to show, they need to thank the company, they signal to them, okay, yeah, and a lot of them actually also almost react pretty self-interested in the sense that they signal that they've received it and they say something about it, and they at the same time say, okay, send me more, send me more, send me more. So what we wanted to do with this research project, and I worked on this project with 3 other researchers in Canada, was really understanding how consumers perceive and deal with this word of mouth generated or induced, marketer generated induced word of mouth, using then this real life context rather than laboratory settings or whatever that has been used mostly in the literature up to now. Specifically, we asked, how do these communities respond to word-of-mouth marketing? What patterns do their communication strategies assume? Can we start to see, as a marketeer, maybe does it make sense to rather target these type of bloggers or that type of bloggers? What kind of response can we expect if we target this type of blogger versus that type of bloggers? That were the kind of questions we were interested in. We used, or we archived, basically, we managed from the 90 bloggers to really follow 83, because there is a couple of people that in the end their blogs were no longer accessible. So from 83 bloggers, we started to build a baseline understanding of what their blog was about and the relationship that they maintained with their audiences, starting 3 months before the seeding campaign, and we continued our data collection up to 3 months after the seeding campaign, meaning that we had 6 months worth of data for every blogger, which included everything they wrote, plus visuals like photo or that kind of content, plus the comments of their readers. That was an enormous amount of data, and I spent really a whole summer looking at half of that, and we had one of the other researchers who looked at the other half, and in the end it was really too much, so we focused the data analysis really more to a more specific limited period in time. We figured out that around the seeding campaign there was usually an anticipatory post. People had been selected, so they would so to say signal to the community something is going to happen. Then there was the product seeding, and then basically they continued talking about the phone for the longest up to 4 weeks after the product seeding. So basically then we limited our actual real analysis on these 6 weeks per blogger. It was a qualitative data analysis, and we used all the techniques that are established in the marketing literature to do that well. In the paper, as you will see, because we had 83 bloggers, it was really a lot of data. And in order to build our story and to really to really illustrate what we found there, in the paper we pick out 4 bloggers that really represented, so to say, the key 4 strategies that we observed in the marketplace. Today, in the interest of time, I will present 2 of those to you, but if you're interested, I think it's my paper. I think it's pretty nice to read. It's not a lot of modeling, it's stories, it's about people, so I definitely invite you to, if you want to discover the other 2 types, go and read the paper, or the part of the findings, let's say. So what did we find? The big picture is that we see that there is 4 different types of strategies that bloggers took up when they were faced with this invitation of being a semi-marketer. There's a 5th one that we do not really talk about so much in the blog, that is those bloggers that opted out, that did not talk about it. They accepted the phone, but in the end they didn't talk about it on their blog. There were about 7 or 9 in the whole sample, so yeah, 10%, about 10%. I will tell you a little bit later why we think that was the case. So we have 4 strategies: evaluation, explanation, embracing, endorsement. I will go a little bit into that after all, but what were the factors that determined which type of strategy people took up? That was basically had the identity narrative that bloggers had put forth on their blogs. In a blogging context, everybody is presenting a story about himself. That can be a personal story for example, the mommy blogger, but that could also be a professional story for the professional blogger. And in these blogs, what people do, it's a diary type of writing, right? People relate past events, they fantasize or they talk about future projects, and they all try to link that together into, as we call that, life narratives. That makes sense. And these life narratives usually tend to be then dominated by a couple of life themes, things that are very, very important to us. And you see that occurring on the blog. I will illustrate with examples. So blogs, you can say that it's a character or a life story narrative. I'm putting up a particular character. So that was one determining factor. The other factor then was really what type of relationship they had been building up with their community. Was there communal norms? Was that a very friendship type of relationship? Was that much more a relationship where they put themselves in the spotlight? It's all about me. In that sense, there were different types of blogs. Blogs that focus much more on me, blogs that focus much more on us, blogs that focus, for example, much more on products, and that also definitely influenced the reaction of the bloggers. Oh dear, warn me if I don't pay attention. I will restart it in the break. Well, these were the 2 main things that we observed differences within our data. Then, of course, we'll also say to complement that, it is important to take into account that probably the venue, or how we call it, the communications forum, has an effect. We looked here at blogs, but the forum could have also been a party, it could have been a campus, as we just see with the citizen student. That has effects too. And in the end, of course, you also what will affect strategies depends on the marketing promotion that you're giving people and the conditions that you set. In this particular case, as I explained to you, the bloggers were given complete freedom about what to say. So the 4 strategies that we're highlighting, we say they differ on 2 dimensions. They differ on the dimension whether their interpersonal orientation was much more communal oriented, so acting on behalf of their communities, versus very individualistic oriented, acting on behalf of themselves, and then how they dealt with this inherent tension of them taking up a semi-marketer role, being first a consumer or a human being part of a human friendship network, and then taking up, accepting these free products and talking about that, it kind of switches you to a different kind of logic, a marketing logic, a market logic that is distinct from a friendship, communal norms. There's bloggers that were very explicit about this tension, they addressed it, and there were bloggers that did not so. And as we will see, that also had an effect on then how their audiences reacted to their word-of-mouth recommendations or word-of-mouth stories. So as I say, I highlight two people. Here we have Alicia. Alicia is a stay-at-home mommy. She has 2 young kids. She's married to a player in a band, basketball player, whatever. And she has been blogging for quite a long time. Her current blog then now can be really characterized, she characterizes as a mommy blog. So she talks about her kids. She talks about her daily life with her kids. And then, as I told you, in this blog, the theme, the motive, the life theme that pops up is honestly. For example, in her About page, she says, I'm using this blog to talk about the real trials and tribulations that we're going through as being parents, as being mother. Because usually people only talk about how wonderful it is to have kids, but actually it is very hard, and a lot of times I have no idea what I need to do. She says, I'm using this blog to be honest about these kind of things. And she has a large following of other parents that either also maintain their blogs or not, well, appreciate her a lot for this honesty, being honest. When she receives the phone, there is initial disbelief, and this is something that in our particular database we have observed a lot, but as I tell you, I think for a part it can be explained to the fact that the product seeding campaign was really one of the first ones on Canadian territory. So she is completely bluffed by the fact that she is singled out as an influential. When I first heard, when they offered me this free cell phone in exchange of nothing more complicated than promising just to use it and maybe write about it, honestly, I thought it was a scam. I thought it was a scam. We see that popping up with a lot of bloggers. That is how they react to it. And then she, as many others, what they do is that is what they do. They're bloggers, so they go online, they serve in the blogosphere to verify that indeed it is a real offer, and there's other bloggers out there that have received it. When she verified that indeed it is actually something real, she's amazed. She is completely overbluffed, and she's so happy that she is considered an influential. So she discloses the criteria, and she does so because she's very communal oriented. She really cares a lot about her readers. So she discloses everything, saying, well, I fit everything, la 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 la. Maybe it's not so clear. Yeah, you have to be someone. So the way she writes it down, the way she communicates the criteria is also to tell her audience, maybe you can fit the criteria as well. And then I'm telling you about this cool offer out there in the marketplace. Maybe you can apply for the program as well. So she really tries to extend the offer, so to say, to her readers. And then, in line with her narrative, she says, I can be honest, and if I hate the phone altogether, I can say that this is important for her, because her narrative is all about honesty. So this is something that, again, that pops up again and again and again. Yes?
Just understand the logic behind. I mean, you consider a blogger that has like 400
daily visits?
Yeah, daily visits already influential just because of that?
Yeah. But the criteria that were used were the ones that I put up there. So we can debate whether that were the right criteria to use. It's easy to implement this criteria because otherwise, how do you measure? Yeah. Exactly. But I mean, how do you answer to this question to yourself? How would you rely on these only criteria to assess whether the people are influential or not? It goes back to what we discussed last time, really, that the easiest criteria for marketers to observe that gives an indication about whether they're influential, yes or no, is the size of the network. So influential has been more or less limited to social influence. How many people do you have in your network? It's true that that is only one little part of the whole story of being influential. What we're trying to say in this paper is that maybe as a marketeer, you do not only necessarily care about the scope of your word of mouth, but you care about the type of word of mouth that people will engage in, and that is really the point of the paper. So the limitation of the paper in the end is that we don't tie it down to the bottom line. So we do not know which of the 4 bloggers in the end generated the most sales. We didn't make an econometric model as we had in the Godes and Meislin paper. Again, 2 weeks ago, we didn't do that. So we do not have the bottom line. So there it's also difficult for me to start to say which one was the most influential, because then you kind of want to see what is the effect on the bottom line, right?
There is no study about the relevance of this criteria with respect to other possible criteria. Like this is reliable at 50%. We don't know precisely, you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean. There's a lot of studies that have looked to parts of that story. But it's difficult to say, and I think here we're trying to start with this paper, we're trying to start to see how that works. It's difficult to give general rules because it depends on so many other things. It depends on the character narrative, it depends on the relationship that the bloggers have with their audiences, it depends on the promotion itself, and it depends on the venue. So even that is the point that we're saying here. It's difficult to start to say, okay, you need to have at least 400 people per day, otherwise you're not an influential. I think it's not as clear. It would be nice if it would be as clear-cut as that, but that is not what we're observing. So this girl is very, very pleased with the phone, and she writes about it. She focuses her review very much on the product. She says that she's so thrilled with it, la 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 la. And by the 3rd or the 4th post that she continues again to say, oh, look at this, and how wonderful, I made these pictures of my daughters, and it's the phone, la 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 la. People start to be very jealous. And this jealousy, we have analyzed that as a reaction to the fact that her talking about this phone and her almost bragging about this phone doesn't fit at all with her character narrative, nor with really the topic of the blog. Because she is a mommy blogger, people come there to read about her daughters, and all of a sudden they're faced with all these stories about the phone. And maybe there's also some moral hazard there. She has been singled out as an influential, but although she tried to extend the offer to her readers, they did not receive this phone. And there's a lot of jealousy, and we see this in several cases, that is again is something that marketers might not necessarily be aware of, that if you start to give a phone to one of you, all the rest are going to say, but why not me? And that is what we're seeing here. So it's a negative effect. What is interesting with this blogger too is that it looks like her participation in this campaign more or less awakens her to her capacity of being an influential. And because she's a stay-at-home mother, she has some difficulty in paying the bills. She decides, well, you know, I'm spending all this time in maintaining my blog. Apparently I have some power in the marketplace. Why don't I capitalize on that? And she signs up for these pay-per-post types of services where she receives some compensation every time she reviews products. There's big backlash in her community because, again, as I tell you, that is not what the people are coming for. They have thought that they were a friendly relationship with someone that was one of them, that was also finally talking about these trials and tribulations of motherhood, and all of a sudden they're faced with a blog that has all these talks about granite countertops and telescopes, and she says in her blog, of course I only pick those products that I can truthfully endorse. Well, good, but still the people that are reading her blog, they don't care about reading about telescopes. So in order to deal with this tension, what she does is she starts a separate review blog. It's still within the context of her mommy blog, but it's a separate tag that you can click on. You have the about page, you have her blog, and then you have my review blog, or whatever how she calls it exactly. And then indeed you see that the tension subsides. However, there's also practically no one reacting to her review things. So what now? You're the marketeer. You have indeed this pretty influential blogger that has, or influential blogger, I need to be careful what I say there. We have someone that has a big audience. So when she talks about the phone, a lot of people will hear about that. But now she talks about this phone still on her blog, so you think you're going to get an influential blogger, but actually no one reads that part of her blog. So that is, it is her way of dealing with her role as a semi-marketer and to still also take care of the interests of her readers with whom she engages in a particular kind of relationship. The other blogger that I like to highlight is Judith. Judith, and I chose these two particular examples because I think they're pretty exemplary for what we still see today in the marketplace. Judith, I think we can really characterize her as a professional blogger. She is an ER nurse that has been on sick leave for 2 years. She has real difficulty paying the bills. And in order to make up for that, she's maintaining 12 or 13, how many say, 12 blogs that she really diligently monetizes. So she is this host that has these topics. Every week she has certain question and answers. She has theme weeks. She is like the Oprah Winfrey of these blogs that is entertaining her audiences, and she's very carefully tracking her readerships and all these kind of things. And her blog is indeed, there is paid advertisements there with which she makes money and that kind of stuff. When she receives, and she also talks very much about her difficulties of dealing with the disease. So that is the overarching story, so to say. When she gets accepted to receive this free product, she reacts to it very professionally. She knows what is the role of the marketeer, and she has incorporated these roles in her own blog. So she starts with a teaser campaign to warm up her audience a little bit. So she says, I have received a, I've received a question mark, I'm going to pick it up. I will give it a 2-hour workout while I will return home with it. Yes, it is something that works right out of the box. I'm quite pleased with it so far. And then also she says it's free, no obligations at all. So she's also giving some sort of a disclosure about the fact that it is a product seeding and she gets it for free. It is something that we would see a professional marketeer doing, right? Building up some kind of attention, like what would that be about? Then, when she actually starts to talk about the phone, again she uses quite clever rhetoric. She has a blog, a posting, in which she tells about her misfortunes during that day. There's a couple of things. I think her television breaks down, which requires a very expensive repair, which is awful for her, and all her readers know that because she doesn't have a lot of money. She receives some negative comments on her blog, and well, there's a couple of bad things that are happening. And then at the rhetorical device at the end of that story, she says, oh yeah, but you remember I got this free product and it is a phone. And that is my light of the day because I got this free phone. And by positioning it like this, everybody says, oh, we're so happy for you. We're so happy for you. So happy that you received this phone. Can you imagine? This is very clever for her to convince her audience that it is okay for her to receive this free product. Her whole review is not necessarily talking about the phone so much. She doesn't talk about the phone that much, very differently from Alicia. Alicia gives a review. Alicia is the dream reviewer. She says, it's lovely, it's the screen, it's this, it's everything what Mobitech maybe was hoping for. However, the effect there is maybe not what they were hoping for. Here there is not a whole lot of talking about the phone, but everybody buys it. So, as I say, they are delighted for a good further. Judith continues professionalizing her blog, and at one point in the period that we're observing her, she actually announces that she makes already $10,000 with her 12 blogs. So that to give you an idea of that she is really professionalized. And what is interesting also is her remark saying, okay, she reflects a bit on her position as a semi-marketer. She says, okay, maybe I do not always reveal that I received products for free, but I know that you, my trusted audience, knows when I'm talking about products truthfully or when I talk about them in my role as a marketeer. And you know that. And maybe she's absolutely right. Maybe indeed this is definitely the future that we're all have. Now we're all accustomed when we put on the TV, we instantly, within 1 second, maybe even less, we know whether we're watching a movie, the news, where we want an ad. We know that. We have built up ways to recognize that. Maybe here it is indeed the same, and that we will start to pick up little signs that tell us whether it is a truthful recommendation or not. So basically in the whole sample we see that bloggers then are dealing with these tensions between their community and acting on behalf of their community, acting on behalf of themselves, because receiving a phone for worth 400 Canadian dollars is nice, and please give me more, give me more. And then, yeah, just our credibility. So we'll see that these 4 different ways of handling Web Debt are really dependent on whether they're more oriented towards the community, more oriented towards themselves, and whether they're more or less explicit about this tension. Basically, we see that a positive response also from your readers is dependent upon the blogger's capacity to integrate the story about the phone in a fitting way. It needs to fit with their narrative, it needs to fit with their relationship. They need to show that they've been acting on behalf of their community. Or if they act on behalf of themselves, like Judith is doing here, you need to make a pretty compelling story that your audience accepts that. And again, Judith manages to do so by her rhetorical devices, by putting on the whole narrative that she needs the money. And then everybody kind of buys it, as I told you before. It's really that. Our managerial implications there is that, as I actually already was discussing, nowadays, when we're looking at these word-of-mouth marketing campaigns and the ways they are measured, it's usually in terms of amplification. So how, to what extent is the word-of-mouth message spread out in the marketplace? What we're saying here, that is not the only thing you might want to look at. You might want to look at what do people say about it, and we also say that in the end, all positive and negative reactions are not created equally. So marketers need to be pretty aware of these effects that they're causing in these communities. And then you can start to think, okay, if I want what kind of review do I want? Do I want a review about the product itself? Okay, so then someone like Judith or a blog that really focuses on these technical reviews is something that you would want to do. However, the effect of that being that the final receiving audience does not necessarily will react to that word-of-mouth marketing message. I'm sorry about this. So basically what we're saying here, and this is just a first paper, I hope in a range of many more, is that we need to start to develop more sophisticated measurements to tackle or to capture, so to say, what is these narrative outputs? What do people actually really say about these things? And we've given, I think, quite some ideas about that. So for example, well, also what we say in the end, what is definitely clear, what we've definitely observed with this campaign is that there's quite some receptivity about of receiving these free products. Consumers still are maybe struggling with these tensions, but they're willing to take up that struggle, because a lot of us are in the end just interested to receive these free products. And it works as well, because this blogger says, okay, I mean, getting this phone for free makes me in the end want to talk about it a lot more than when I would normally talk about the phone that I just bought. So there he does give some justification to marketeers that giving these products away for free will indeed increase the word of mouth. Do you have questions about this? Discussions? Well, this is the other one. I will not let that. You can read about it as I say. Oh, we're not lucky today, huh? The point that I was making before is that the persuasion knowledge model is explaining, as I say, for example, how we would know when we're dealing with an advertisement or the journal or whatever. Whenever we know that we're dealing with someone that is trying to sell something to us, we have persuasion knowledge. We know how to deal with that. So when we're dealing with a persuasion attempt, we have a lot of coping strategies to block that out. And that is really what we're observing now in the marketplace. The moment that people are faced with a friend who receives rewards for telling them about products, basically our reactions become the same towards traditional advertisement. We have coping strategies kicking in. Although indeed it fits better to have this rewarded word of mouth in relationships where it is clear that there is some sort of a monetary reward. So now I'm not really clear. What I'm trying to say is the moment when there is a market logic, the moment you're at a review website, we all know that there is a big possibility that people receive these products for free. We will not blame the blogger for that, because that is just the deal. Okay, this blogger has accepted these free products, there is a marketing logic, we accept that. However, the likelihood that we will take this recommendation into account becomes much smaller, because we have these coping strategies to work with. On the other hand, if you have still this communal logic, if it is a friendship relationship, then people do not accept that this other person received a reward for engaging in word of mouth. Although the word of mouth still has a much bigger effect. So there is a little bit of paradox for the marketeers, right? That is the effect on the receivers of the word of mouth episode, so to say. There's also an effect on what is happening with this thing. There's also an effect on the sender, on the person that engages in the word of mouth on behalf of the marketeer. We call this, or we can explain this by self-determination theory. The moment you start to give people rewards for talking on your behalf, you more or less turn their truthful enthusiasm for your brand into a job. Think again about the citizen marketer, the student that we had a quote for at the beginning, who is being recruited by JetBlue. She really loved JetBlue. She was a true brand ambassador, so to say, naturally. And this is why JetBlue recruited her. But by recruiting her, she needs to organize parties, she needs to maintain the Facebook website of JetBlue on a daily basis. So her job for presenting and promoting JetBlue, it becomes a job. It becomes something that is externally rewarded, which means then that in the end the true emotions that she had while talking so enthusiastic about this brand, will go away because it becomes a job. People start to question their own motivation. So am I actually now telling people about JetBlue because I really like JetBlue, or am I doing that because I get free miles? Right. So that is also dynamics that are occurring now in the marketplace, and where marketeers maybe in a sense are spoiling what they hoped they would find there by having these word-of-mouth marketing programs more and more and more. They're cutting their own fingers, so to say. Let's finish this story, because I think it relates also a lot to ethics. If you're, as a marketer, giving away free products, you can do so more or less ethically. And there's quite some examples out there of unethical practices. Maybe not necessarily only linked to giving away products. We have this one example in France at the beginning of the blogosphere, so to say, when that became a hot topic here as well. We had Vichy, who created Le Journal de ma peau. So it was a diary in which a girl would tell about her life, and then on the side she would talk about her skin problems and how Vichy was miraculously helping her to solve her skin problems. Well, that was put on the market as a truthful diary, and very quickly it was found out that the Vichy marketing team was behind it. It was exactly the example we've seen in the class before with marketers that try to pretend that they're consumers. Is that ethical, yes or no? Sony in 2002, it's also already a little while ago, for their promotion of their phone with a camera in it, they hired actors that would spread in big cities in North America, and that would pose as consumers, and that would ask passers-by, oh, can you please, excuse me, they would pose as tourists. So when there would be people in the street, they would ask me, oh, can you please take a picture of me? And then they would give them their phone with the camera in it, and then hoping that that would initiate, oh, this is funny, this is a phone. And then the actors, of course, were trained to say, yeah, that's Sony Ericsson, la 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 la. Is that ethical? Again, paying other people to act on your behalf and then not saying so. And then another example here from Unilever. In 2008, they made a campaign, Go green and small with all. It's the detergent, or the all detergent that is eco-friendly. So what they did is they engaged in a big nationwide campaign in which schools, elementary school kids, could enroll with their classes. There was a whole package. It's what we were talking also again about in the earlier session, linking yourself as a brand that maybe people do not necessarily care so much about detergent, but then linking yourself to something people do care about, which is being eco-friendly, giving a lot of materials to the schools and to the kids. But in order, for example, to be eligible for the final reward, which was iPhones that were eco-friendly for the whole school and they needed to spread eco-friendly branded messages about L in their families. So they were really recruited as little Unilever ambassadors. So is that ethical? Mom, can you please buy this? And then, yeah. Well, we'll get to that. As of December 1, no. At least not in the US. But, so there's stealth marketing, shilling, it's all these things of marketers behaving unethically. The Word of Mouth Marketing Association, I've mentioned it repeatedly already during last sessions as well, is a trade organization that has been starting in 2004. And they started really with the moment that in North America these word-of-mouth marketing strategies were surging, and they saw that there were a lot of these types of unethical practices going on. And they said, in order for us as a trade, as marketeers, to not spoil the ground too much, we need to act ourselves, and we need to come up with ethical guidelines. So they set up this trade union with the mission is to create an environment of trust between consumers and marketeers. They've worked hard on coming up with a code of ethics, and the first one was actually already published in February 2005. They also devised an ethics toolkit that you can download from their website. It consists of 20 questions that you, when you're a company, can ask yourself to make sure that indeed you behave ethically in these word-of-mouth marketing programs. And it is, of course, also a nice device that you can use to educate your consumers, to educate your employees, to educate your stakeholders, signaling to them that you're an ethically responsible word-of-mouth marketer. The document is a living document, how they say, and they regularly go through discussions with their members to change the rules, because the field is changing so fastly, so rapidly. So just now in July they had a big revision about how things were formulated, and what, for example, is what types of rewards are accepted, yes or no. And actually everybody, and I think there's at this moment about 140 companies that are members, so there is an advisory panel board that actually looks at their practices and guides over that to make sure that they are abiding the ethics code that the organization had set forth. The core values then, what is it? They say on their website, consumers come first, honesty isn't optional, and deception always exposed. So they have this honesty of the ROE, return on, relational, not return on investment, relationship, opinion, identity. So you always need to say who you're speaking for. You are free to say whatever you want, either positive or negative, and you need to say who you are, so no false identities. These are the three key main rules. What is interesting is that the word-of-mouth marketing organization has played an important informative advisory role for the new Federal Trade Committee guidelines that have been announced last October, and as I say, come into effect as of December 1st. Maybe you've heard about this. It is a Federal Trade Committee, so it applies to the US. But what is interesting to discuss here for all of us involved is that these guidelines are the first one, I would say, that actually really include in writing consumer-generated content. So they really have updated the guidelines to address these kind of issues of consumers receiving goodies and that kind of things. And the guidelines had not been updated, for example, since 1980. So now, according to these guidelines, any material connection that there is between marketers and consumers needs to be disclosed. In the paper that we presented there, consumers still had an option, so to say it yes or no, that they received a free product. And we see, in our sample of 83 bloggers, there is about 60% that indeed says that they received it for free. However, there's still 40% that did not say it. They talk about the phone or whatever, but they did not say that they received the product for free. That, as of December 1st, is no longer allowed. And also, even, as they say, material connections, if there's reward payments or other value creations, but also if there's other types of relationships, maybe there's not necessarily need to be a reward or something, but if there is a relationship that consumers do not expect, you still need to say it. And they can be held liable for it, and they can face a fine up to $11,000 for accepting free products and not revealing that on their blogs or videos or whatever. Yes? Of course, yeah, there's been a lot of critique of this thing. They say it is unfair that we go after the bloggers themselves. It should be only the advertisers because they're the bad guys. And there is a lot of practical critique to this thing, saying, okay, how are we going to know? Because there is so many of these product seeding campaigns going on that indeed we can wonder who is going to look for that. What will probably happen is that they will look for a couple of typical cases. They will make some media trial out of that in the hope to scare people off. It's absolutely true that there will be many practices still going on that will not be able, that will go unnoticed. But at least now there is some official guidelines in place that do say that is no longer allowed, and that wasn't the case before. And that should maybe in the end make people. What it does definitely is that it has started a clear debate in the blogosphere, in among people that are likely to receive these kind of goodies, and that is maybe also already good, because there was a lot of people that just took it for granted that they received all these products for free, would not say it, but we see that there's a lot of issues around that, and now people at least, when they've heard about it, they maybe make more a conscious choice in revealing it, yes or no. Yes. Yeah, that makes a difference. Sure, yeah, that makes a difference too.
That's only for the web, those guidelines? Does that happen every day on television? Yeah.
Another big critique.
And also examples of things. I mean, I just, got I went to a national sales seminar thing, and I got free Clarin products. I'm pretty sure that that's advertising. I think that, is that illegal now?
You're right. You're right. I think there maybe they didn't necessarily ask you also to engage in word of mouth. I think marketers can still give you a free product. It becomes more a problem in this case when they say we give you a free product and we hope that you blog about it. There's a difference there. But this is the gray lines, and a lot of the critique indeed included the fact that journalists have been receiving goodies for years. But there again, it's a little bit true that the convention has been, when we're reading a magazine, we know that. But it's true, and that is the critique here. So the critique definitely is via bloggers now all of a sudden singled out. It's not fair, it will be impossible to put it into place. But what it has definitely done is it started a more open discussion about these things. And in the end, maybe there is still quite some people out there that have no clue that there is all these people that receive these free products and that talk about it on the blog. These kind of discussions have maybe waken up more people in the marketplace to these kind of practices, and that will help to protect them. Well, yeah. There is maybe, if you like, there is quite some interesting background information about these rules on SlideShare. One of the things is, for example, also this question of then what is this disclosure? What does it mean? What do you need to say about receiving this product, and where do you need to say that? That becomes an issue too. So I definitely invite you to have a look at these things if you want. Well, you want to have a look at these slides? No. The headlines? Let me see.
Were they in the book?
No, they're not there. No, they're not there. No, they're not in my slides. Let's see. I didn't put it up. Stupid. This is completely irritating. Now let me see if I have it here. let me see now, because this is a long one. There should be a short one.
Hello everyone, I'm John Moore, WOM enthusiast with the Word of Mouth Marketing Association. On September 14th, WOMA held a webinar discussing the important issue of endorsements and disclosure as it relates to word of mouth marketing. It's an important topic for a variety of reasons, ranging from ethics to issues related to the FTC's soon-to-be released updated guidelines on testimonials and advertising. This is a nuanced topic, to say the least. Now, I've compiled highlights from the webinar into this short video. Since this topic is nuanced, I highly encourage you to listen to the full archived webinar. It's 60 minutes long, and you can access it at bit.ly/disclosurewebinar. Paul Rand, WOMA President-elect and CEO of Zocalo Group, moderated the call, and he set up the discussion this way.
What we're leading up to is the whole discussion about what constitutes good disclosure, ethical disclosure, and right disclosure in terms of both for the marketer and for the bloggers themselves, to ensure that we're increasing really productive, impactful, and most of all ethical word-of-mouth marketing both online and offline.
John Bell, WOMA President and Managing Director at 360 Digital Influence, jumped in with his take on the 3 areas needed for effective disclosure.
I really see that the definition of kind of clear and best practice disclosures is about 3 things. It's about being complete, it's about being in context, and it's about being yourself. And to backtrack ever so quickly, being complete is what exactly was provided to the influencer in the form of product, service, or allowances of any kind. I think that it matters, in my book, if you were flown into a brand immersion event at no cost to yourself, the influencer, the brand covered those expenses. I think that readers, followers out in the marketplace, ought to know that to be able to judge whether or not that has an impact in how you then share your opinion about the products and services from that brand. So I think being complete is really clear. I think no one appreciates a brand or an influencer who's a little bit cagey about the details. Context, in context, this is about being in proximity to the WOM, which is a weird idea. So being, disclosing in literal physical proximity to where you're sharing about a product or a service is really important. Is it enough to have a disclaimer at the bottom below the fold of a post or of your blog when you've been blogging about a product or service that you've been given some sort of allowance, so to speak, from the brand? I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go. I think it needs to be highly visible and tremendous proximity, and we need to see examples of that in the marketplace, and we're starting to now. The last piece in the be complete, be in context, and be yourself. Be yourself sounds a little kind of squishy and social media-esque. And what I mean there is confirm that this is your opinion.
Sean Corcoran, interactive marketing analyst at Forrester Research, offered up his perspective on disclosure as it relates to compensating bloggers in a sponsored conversation-like arrangement.
The first thing that I had was just clarity. I mean, it's the obvious one, but it needs to be very clear to the audience that there is some kind of material compensation involved. And on top of that, I agree with John. What he called proximity to the WOM, I think I actually would. I was just going to say it's up front. It needs to be up front. I see too many bloggers or other people kind of putting it towards the end that, or somewhere else, that there was some kind of material compensation. The disclosure wasn't obvious until afterwards, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Tom Collinger, chair of the Integrated Marketing Communications Program at the Medill School, Northwestern University, believes self-policing is the best way to bring forth genuine testimonials online. He also brings up this interesting idea from the medical profession.
The medical profession has a Hippocratic oath of doing no harm. I like the general principle and believe that a similar one is what should be what guides all of this, something along the lines of not attempting to mislead or fool any of the stakeholder groups that a brand or company is looking to influence. And my enthusiastic belief is that it's not just a good idea, but there's proof galore for decades, which is that those that do not follow that principle are outed, and those that do follow those principles are rewarded with a growing enthusiastic customer base.
Jory Desjardins, co-founder and president of Strategic Alliances at BlogHer, shares the model BlogHer uses for its bloggers to be upfront and clear about disclosure matters.
So in the case of our bloggers, if they are not traditional review bloggers, and this is not something that they do on a regular basis, then we've asked them to review products in another place. And that place is fully disclosed, but it also sets the expectation that this is where I'm going to be reviewing products.
Tony DiResta, WOMA's general counsel and partner at Mannett, Phelps & Phillips law firm, offered the legal perspective on what constitutes effective disclosure.
The bottom line from the legal perspective, or from the perspective in terms of the content, we need to disclose information to prevent an ad or a blog from being misleading. It needs to be clear and conspicuous, so let's drill down on that. I think we need to consider the placement of the disclosure in the ad and its proximity to the message that's being conveyed. Additional considerations would be the prominence of the disclosure. In other words, you don't want the fine print. Whether the items in the other part of the communication of the ad distract attention from the disclosure, whether the ad is so lengthy that the disclosure actually needs to be repeated. If there are audio messages, we need to think about the volume and the cadence, and in visual disclosures, whether they appear for a sufficient duration, and lastly, whether the language of the disclosure is understandable to the intended audience.
The conversation turned more practical about bloggers disclosing material relationships with brands and marketers. John Bell believes more brands should follow the lead of Walmart and Pepsi in how they work with bloggers.
The per-post disclosure, I think, is a habit that we need to get into. When we talk about other platforms, we'll wrestle with some of the issues there. The terms of engagement on your blog somewhere, I believe that some of the long-term relationships warrant site badges, and those are great. You see that with Walmart, 11 Moms. You see that with PepsiCo's Fab Five, and many other programs where there's a consistent long-term relationship with a collection of influencers.
Sean from Forrester also believes disclosure badges are effective.
Completely agree with John saying. When you have things like badges that are very obvious and start to build that recognition that people will have with the badge, to know that that there's something happening here, there's compensation, and it's almost a badge of honor in some sense.
The conversation turned to Twitter and how people can best disclose material relationships on Twitter. John Bell supports inserting words or hashtags into a tweet. However, Sean Corcoran doesn't think that's realistic.
Twitter is a whole new ball of wax, and I actually believe that influencers should be tagging their tweets with something akin to parens DIC as in disclosure and parens, which would then lead you back to, again, that terms of engagement. The problem I see with Twitter is that many people are followed out of context to what I've done on my blog or wherever else I'm communicating and maybe stating that I'm part of this bigger brand panel or engagement program. And so tweets can easily be taken out of context, and marketers and influencers can easily fall prey to, like, well, it's only 140 characters. What do you expect? I mean, I can't fit it all in.
Yeah, I'll just jump on the Twitter thing really quickly because it is the shiny object that everybody's interested in. I'll just state that I've really been advising marketers to stay away from that just yet. I don't believe it in its current format. It's great by itself for disclosure, just because by the nature it is 140 characters, so how much can you really fit in there? And depending on who you talk to, there's between 20 and 50, 60 million people using it. How many of them are going to recognize, hashtag AD or something like that? It's just not there yet. I think it's a good complementary tool for a blogger or someone else to use to help drive to maybe some kind of sponsored post. But right now, I don't think it's great.
By no means should this short video summary serve as a full recap of everything discussed on the webinar. So,
So as you see here, indeed, what it has been doing is stirring up a lot of conversations. There needs to be some sort of more ethical reaction. There needs to be some sort of more disclosure. However, as we also just see earlier, that all this disclosure will probably also, in the sense, undercut or cut the expected credibility effect that marketers are now tapping into when they're recruiting consumers to be their endorsers. So I don't know what will be the next step in word-of-mouth marketing, but it's great that everybody is trying to be ethical, and they need to be. But the effect that will have is, in the end, that consumers now will be considered just as advertisers, and in that sense, you will not be that effective anymore with word-of-mouth marketing. How does it work in Europe? In Europe, they have updated the regulations in 2005, so much more recent than the US, where the last updated guidelines were from 1980. However, in Europe still they do not necessarily talk about consumers taking up the role of marketers. They do talk about all these misleading or deceiving practices of marketers posing as a consumer. So basically also the directive says you may not deceive. And in that sense it would also in the end, I would suppose, apply to bloggers that deceive their readers that they have been paid for things.
Yeah, you just mentioned the fact that they disclose your endorsement to products if you receive some material reward. Will affect negatively the word-of-mouth dynamic?
The outcome. No, it has two effects. It has two effects.
The fact that the most important is the visibility, which is like the more people see this, the more the product will be visible, and then it's about the product instead in the crowd and saying, I'm not going to be visible.
It becomes just advertising, right? This is what advertising is also doing there. You need to be, everybody knows that you as a company are trying to put positive messages out there, and then your brand just needs to be better than all the others to cut the bottom line. It's this, and there is two effects to that, really. The disclosure has positive effects on the sender. The blogger is seen more sincere if he or she discloses that they receive these free products. However, consumers then are less naive or less willing to take the word-of-mouth recommendation into consideration, as they would have been if it was just a friend that say, you know, you need to go and see that movie. Okay, it's good. I trust you. It's a good recommendation. I'll follow up on it. When I know that you're being paid to tell me that, I appreciate you telling me that, because I wouldn't appreciate if I find out later on. So it has a good effect on you, but then I would say, okay, well, then I might as well just go see this other movie.
But then we enter in another sphere which is much more difficult to measure. I mean, how this is the part that in your paper probably is not supported. How these influencers, they really listen.
Yes.
So, I mean, to say that it wouldn't work by assumption, maybe
you're right. You're right. Thanks. No. You're right. You're absolutely right. So that is. It's good. It's good that you point that out. Yes. Yeah.
It seems to me in what we've been hearing that each blog is taken separately, and like a traditional media, it's a TV show, and maybe you'll be teaching biograph, it's very great or whatever. But on the web, it's the exact opposite. There's so many blogs, and people don't get information from one source. So in that respect, there's more efficiency in the information market for us, which is why we see so many media stores that are really different from traditional media stores being so popular now, because they have a lot of integrity, and they have been able to prove that.
Yeah.
It's true for blogs, it's true for journalism, it's true for a lot of things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, a good remark. Yeah. Yeah. Other ideas, comments? Let's go and take a break.